I'm so grateful to Rabbi Ami Hirsch and the Recharging team for inviting me to talk a little bit about one of my favorite things, which is worship and how we recharge worship. So I wanted to frame this in a little bit of a different way, and for some of you who were here at the very beginning of services, which is about 12 of you, I set up an intro that we were going to play around with the idea of experiencing awe in worship. And maybe you, even if you walked in at the end, maybe you felt it at the end with our Ein Keloheinu. But I want you to think for just a moment, think about the last time you experienced awe. Just try to picture it. If you're having a hard time, you don't have to think about like the birth of your child. Think of like even small moments of awe. Can you think of one that has happened to you relatively recently? I'll share mine with you. If we could put up the slide of the tree. I visited my parents last month in Washington State, and we went for the first time to Snoqualmie Falls, and we took a hike, and I came across this tree. And if you look at it, what you can see here is it's basically the trunk of a 250-year-old tree that died, clearly, and then it became the nurse log, essentially, for a new tree that grew up. And you can see, I don't know if you can see that very well, but the tree, the new tree, I couldn't take a picture that got the base and the top, but the new tree goes up like 30 feet itself. And I just thought that that was an awesome sight. And I just stood there and took in this tree. And I was thinking about the idea that decay and things that die can bring nutrients to brand new life, that loss nourishes continuity in some way. So when you think about that moment of awe that you're remembering, how did it feel in your body? What happened to your sense of self in that moment? Dacher Keltner, who is a Berkeley professor, he wrote a book on the science of awe, and he defines awe as the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. So now that vastness can be physical, like when you stand at the edge of a Grand Canyon, or even when you're hearing music in a very big stadium and it's reverberating and you feel a sense of the bigness and of vastness of space, physical space. But vastness can also be about time. Do you know what it's like when you smell something and suddenly it's like you're transported back to your grandmother's kitchen, or you feel like a song will take you back to your high school prom, just hearing it? And you feel like time is vast in this way? Or the vastness can be about even ideas. Like imagine the epiphany, which integrates all these scattered thoughts, and suddenly you get this understanding of the world that makes sense of stuff that didn't make sense before. That's also awe, when you experience that kind of intellectual epiphany. So all of this, when you experience that awe, it humbles us in some way, and it makes us understand that there are some mysteries of the world that are beyond our understanding. But even as awe makes us feel, in some ways, very small, it also makes us feel connected to something much bigger than ourselves. It sort of dissolves the ego, and it makes us feel like the boundaries of ourself disappear. And we understand in some way that we're connected to something that's a system much bigger that we're a part of. In Jewish language, of course, awe is yirah, which is also the same word for fear. Yirah is a trembling awareness. It's humility before great mystery or vastness. It is the knowledge that we are not the center of the universe. And strangely, this doesn't diminish us. It actually liberates us. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel would say that being religious begins with wonder. As he says, awe precedes faith. We must grow in awe in order to reach faith. And of course, Heschel's understanding it has a proof text in Torah. In Deuteronomy 10, it says, Ma Adonai Elohecha sho'el memcha, ki im liyira et Adonai Elohecha. So what does God demand of you? Only this, liyira. Only that you should fear or feel awesomeness of God. So, my thesis here about worship and prayer is that Jews, we are in the awe business. And because this is the most fundamental stance, awe, in order to feel all the other religious feelings that we want to feel, worship needs to be a place where we experience awe, And lucky for us, worship is a place that our ancient ancestors understood were among the best spiritual technologies for feeling awe. So what happens to us when we feel awe? As I said, it kind of quiets the noise, lessens the ego, it softens the illusion that we are separate beings. And we tried to model a little bit of that in our worship service this morning in different ways. But I want to tell us that Dacher Keltner did a lot of work for us already, because he studied thousands of people in 26 different countries and came up with the 8 top wonders that make people feel awe. It doesn't matter where you live or what religion you come from, there is a taxonomy that all human beings feel make them experience awe. So just take for a moment, I know this group could come up with most of these 8, but shout out, what's one thing that you are pretty certain makes people feel awe? Music. Okay, great. That's number 4. Excellent. Give me another one. Nature. Thank you very much. I believe that's number 3. Birth and death. That is definitely on the list. I think that's number 6. Birth and death, they come together. Love. Okay, that should be on there. I'm going to put that in the category, the first category. We're doing very well, though. Okay, so what I'd like to do is, as we think about worship, what I'd like to do is invite us to think about the different wonders that bring us awe, and then to imagine how can we actually have all of these experiences of awe that we know are true and primal in every human being. How could we facilitate that happening in our worship services? We actually tried to touch on all 8 of them in this morning service. It doesn't always have to be big. You don't have, you're not going to have a birth of a child in every service. But if you have a baby naming, just seeing a child can be quite profound, right? And so there are ways that we can also touch on that. And we didn't get to see nature, but we talked about nature today when we did our Yotzer Or prayer and invited people to just remember the miracle of the sun coming up. So I think that it's really built in. But I would like to just walk us through very quickly the 8 wonders that bring awe most definitively for human beings wherever they live across time and space. Okay, so the first slide is, I'm going to start in backwards order. He did make this hierarchical in the sense that like the higher answers was the highest number. This is number 8 though. Number 8 is intellectual epiphany. And this is the idea that you can learn something and it suddenly makes the world make sense, or it brings a lot of threads together, or you go, aha. So this one in particular, the rabbis love, because of course it means that our sermons really matter. Yeah, okay, so imagine though that we do think, and we know that in our worship services, we build in a place where an important kavanah can make a prayer open up for us in a different way. Of course, a teaching of Torah and a sermon, divrei Torah, are deeply important. They built that in because they understood that we couldn't always make sense of our world. And so sermons and words and intellectual epiphany, ideas, these are really important. We know that not every sermon inspires awe, but imagine that our goal would be to bring some greater understanding for people. So, and perhaps the deepest epiphany of awe is this: I am part of something bigger. That's it. I'm part of a people. I'm part of a story. I'm part of creation. I'm part of a covenant. These are profound ideas. When we can help our community understand they are part of this bigger thing, and we can do that in an intellectual epiphany way, I promise you that inspires awe. Okay, the next one, birth and death. I guess this was number 7. Someone said this. Jewish worship puts the miracle of birth and life, the inevitability of death, and the sanctity of memory front and center in every service, as you know. So almost every week at Central, we are lucky we have a baby naming. And one of our favorite things to do when we're done blessing the baby or like saying words to the baby is that we lift up the baby in front of the ark in this Lion King moment. And just to look at this little child and to see purity, to see potential, to see goodness, to see the fear in the parents' faces, to see all of that right in front of you, it never stops feeling miraculous to just see that. And then, of course, we end every service with Kaddish and memory. And worship never tries to hide our mortality. Someday, we all know, every one of us will be on that list. And it reminds us that if we live our lives well, then we will be worthy of being remembered. So that's a very important part. It's built into all of our services, is this reminder of the awe of birth and of death. Number 6. Oh, that turned out so small. But spirituality and religion. It's funny that we didn't name that as one of the wonders of awe, but yeah, religion, spirituality. I might say that spirituality is perhaps best described as the realization of oneness. Guess what? Jews, we invented that idea. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Echad. God is one. Now, that's not about God being number one, like supremacy. Being one means that we are all part of the same God. We are all interconnected. We are all interdependent on each other. I think this is one of the deepest hungers that people bring into worship today. They want to feel like they're not alone. They want to feel like their existence matters. They want to feel like that there is more to life than productivity and self-satisfaction and their own survival. And this is where prayer can be truly transformative. When we say the Shema and we really mean it, God is one, oneness. It's when we stand at the Amidah and we let ourselves be spoken to. It's when we know how to bless one another, as we did today. It's when we say Kaddish and the room carries memory with us. It's when a person enters a room feeling invisible, but leaves feeling seen. All of that is spiritual awe. How well are we doing that in our worship services? Number 5, this might be one of the ones that Jews undersell the most. Visual beauty. Jews don't talk enough about this, but beauty matters. Space, it teaches. Light teaches. Color teaches. Texture teaches. The arrangement of a room tells people whether they are individuals or whether or not they're joining a community. The Torah mantles, the flowers, your clothes, the flickering candles, that all signals that we're leaving ordinary time and entering into sacred time. So, and we know Hidur Mitzvah, which is beautifying a commandment, is not just ornamental, it is spiritual pedagogy. Beauty helps prepare the soul for reverence. So we actually undersell visual beauty as Jews to our peril, I think. If worship is meant to inspire awe, then we should let our spaces do some of the work. And that I don't mean that to be just superficial. This is not about being fancy. This is not about excess. Sometimes simplicity can be very beautiful, but it's about your intention. Are you creating a space that has some visual beauty to it? Have you intentionally elevated the space in some way that lets people know you care, that we are entering into different time and space? Okay, number 4, this was the first one that got heard. Of course, this one's for the cantors, and this is the one that I would have put as number 1, but that's okay, that's music. I often say that music is my native spiritual language, but I'm going to guess that that is actually true for all of us. If you've ever seen like a 3-year-old classroom, those kids are always just walking through the world singing, and now I'm gonna build blocks, and I'm eating my pretzels, and they're just singing their way through life. We all kind of come into the world singing and feeling that, you know, people say, oh, my baby, she loves music. Every baby loves music. We all love music. It is it's the oldest human technology for transcendence. And before language, we had vocal bursts. Before there was theology, there were chants and ohms and hums. So we're built this way. Music reaches beyond the intellect, and it goes straight into your body. It goes straight to memory. It goes straight to your identity. That's what music can do. It is incredibly powerful. It carries meaning and emotions that words cannot capture. A nigun can turn a group of individuals into a community. A great Hazanut Krechts, like we heard this morning, can transport us all the way back to our Jewish ancestors. And of course, a beautiful melody can make us cry. So worship, I want to say a few things about the way music should work in a service. I think too often, and I'm trained as a cantor, so I'm going to say this, and I feel like in my heart, my first title is certainly a chazan. I think we're trained too often to feel like we are the keepers of Jewish musical memory and the performers of beautiful music. And we are both of those things. But I think primary before all of those things, a cantor is an energy worker. And to be an energy worker, you have to be able to feel the room. You have to be able to really listen to where people are. And then you have to be able to say, what we need right now is to bring this energy up, or we need to actually calm people down. That's what we're really doing. And you can only do that if you're really feeling the room. And so one of the things that I always insist on at Central is people have to be, if you're leading, you have to be out of the book. For some reason, we don't teach that enough. But I promise you that if I was leading the service like this the whole time, I would not be able to read the room, right? I can't tell. In fact, I remember doing a book talk recently, and I was in Seattle, and my sister had just seen me do a book talk the day before, and then she saw me the next day, and she said, Angela, you seem so off this time. You just didn't have the same warmth. And I didn't really register that, and then I realized that the room in Seattle was at this JCC where they had darkened the entire audience so that I couldn't see anyone's faces at all. And it didn't even register to me that because I was speaking to a blackout, that I wasn't feeling any energy and I wasn't giving it back in the same way. We underestimate what the energy exchange is that happens, especially with music, and how critically important that is, and how much you need to be looking at your community. You need to actually, if you're a shliach tzibor, you're the messenger of the people, you better see what the people are giving you and feel it and listen to it. I also just want to say that so much of this is a visual experience. So it's small things, but is your body moving? Do you feel natural? What are you doing up here? All of that stuff matters to the way people are going to hear that music as well. So, but imagine one last thing. When you get everybody to sing together, now the science is people start even breathing together, and their heartbeats start to match. How awesome is that? So talk about feeling like music can do something to create a sense of awe. That is about as awesome as it gets. Okay, this one was also one of the first things that most people think of, which is nature. Most of us, I think that usually when I say, when was the last time you felt God, even if people don't believe in God, they'll usually give me some mountaintop answer. That's something about being in the mountains or nature. I think we are all hardwired to feel something deep when we're in nature. And this may seem obvious, but it is striking how often our worship is really sealed off from nature. Some of you are lucky enough to pray in sanctuaries that have windows out into nature, like WRT. I see some WRT in the house. That sanctuary was built so that you could see nature right outside your window. Some of us get to pray outdoors, if you're in LA or something lovely like that. But here in New York, most of us don't see nature in our prayer spaces. But Judaism is saturated, our worship is saturated with creation language, right? Morning blessings, Yotzer Or, which we sang this morning, the blessings for rain and dew, light and darkness, breath. So we are a tradition that blesses, oceans and lightning and rainbows and blossoms and bread. And yet, so often our prayer happens in rooms that could easily just second as hosting a budget meeting. So let's think about how do we pay attention to drawing attention to nature, even if you don't get to see it physically? The language is all there to help us pay attention to the wonder of it all. And I think, though, we should remember that nature teaches us a profound theological truth, which is that we are not above creation, we are within it. We belong to it. So finding ways that we can actually reconnect to that wonder of nature. Okay, so the top two sources of awe are ones that require a little bit of explanation. So number 2 is called collective effervescence. This is a phrase borrowed from the Jewish theologian Emil Durkheim, who used the idea collective effervescence to describe that electric feeling that arises when people are all moving together with shared attention. So that means, imagine a ritual dance, marching in a protest, even the wave at a basketball game. There's something you're like, whoa, that just makes you feel something when you see everybody moving together with shared attention. I even think sometimes I feel that kind of collective effervescence awe when I'm watching a crowded commute on the subways in New York, and you just see mobs of human beings moving together in kind of without having to talk to each other in some organized fashion, and you feel like, oh, I'm part of this larger system in some way. All of that is collective effervescence. It's also just movement. Now, some religions are way more comfortable moving in prayer. Like, you walk into a black church and they are dancing and moving in a way that Jews would feel very uncomfortable doing. We joke that we don't know how to clap on the 3 and the 4 or whatever. So the 2 and the 4. But we do have shuckling. We stand and we bow and greet the Sabbath bride. We bend our knee when we are called to worship. We sway for the Shehechianu. Okay, not everyone sways, but I try to sway. But the idea is there is some movement that's built in. And when I was watching, those of you who were here at the beginning when we did Nisim B'chol Yom with Rising in Remembrance, when we move together, there is something incredibly beautiful about the sight of people moving together with shared attention. And something happens when our bodies coordinate, when our breaths synchronize, when we catch a refrain and we're all kind of moving together. This is one of the greatest sources of awe. And if you've ever seen a crowded stadium at a concert and all the lights are all moving in the same way, that's collective effervescence, that's awe. Okay, and now, the number one, drum roll, the number one source of awe is moral beauty. Now, what is moral beauty? These are the extraordinary acts of kindness, selflessness, generosity, courage, resilience, grit, selflessness that ordinary people do. So Keltner, after studying awe with thousands of people across all these countries, found that the greatest source of awe in the world are other human beings. Think about that for a moment. Of course, Judaism knows this. Every time we tell a story of courage, of chesed, of survival, of moral clarity, and we have heard a lot of those stories in recent years, and especially coming out of Israel, we know we're inviting awe into the room. And when we honor a congregant who has cared for a sick spouse for years, when we bless someone who has chosen Judaism, especially in the last few years, when we invite former hostages to share their stories of resilience and courage, when we tell the story of someone who's acted with extraordinary generosity, when we point to human goodness and say, look, there is holiness and awe made visible. Our worship services should do that more intentionally. Every service should contain somewhere a moment of moral beauty. It could be a short story, a testimony, a blessing, a reminder that goodness is real and it still walks among us.